Hello everyone, I'm the narrator. If you're using this video to fall asleep, please like, subscribe and comment where you're from and what time you're listening. Now, relax and enjoy the story. I grew up in an old house, the kind that had history etched into every floorboard. It wasn't haunted, at least I never thought so. Just odd. Doors would creak open when no one was near them. The floor would groan under invisible weight, and shadows in the corners seemed darker than they should be. But I never felt afraid, not until the mirror arrived. It was my grandmother's, a massive antique thing with an ornate golden frame, its glass warped slightly from age. After she passed, my mother brought it home, saying it had been in our family for generations. We hung it in the hallway, right outside my bedroom. That's when the unease started. At first, it was small things. I'd glance at the mirror as I walked by and feel like my reflection lingered a fraction of a second too long. Or sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I'd think I saw myself smiling when I wasn't. But when I looked directly, everything seemed normal. One night as I passed the mirror on my way to the bathroom, I stopped. The hallway was dimly lit, but I could clearly see myself staring back. I leaned in closer. My reflection did the same. But then, it blinked. I hadn't blinked. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. I stared into the mirror, waiting, but my reflection only moved when I did. Had I imagined it? The longer I watched, the more ridiculous I felt. Finally, shaking my head, I turned away. But then I heard a whisper. It was faint, just a breath of sound, but it came from the mirror. I froze, my back to it, and listened. Silence. I went back to my room, shut the door, and tried to convince myself I was just tired. That night, I dreamed of the mirror. In the dream, I stood in front of it, watching my reflection, only it wasn't quite me. The eyes were wrong. Too dark, too deep, like endless pits, and the smile. It was too wide, stretching just a little too far. Then, in a single, horrifying moment, my reflection stepped forward, out of the glass. I woke up with a strangled gasp, my sheets damp with sweat. My room was dark, except for a sliver of light from the hallway. And then I noticed my door was open. I always closed my door before bed, always. Swallowing hard, I sat up. My eyes flicked to the hallway, where I could just barely see the edge of the mirror. And then, my blood turned to ice. My reflection was watching me. I wasn't in front of the mirror. I was in bed, frozen in place. But my reflection was standing there just outside my door, its dark eyes locked onto mine, and then it grinned. I don't remember much after that. I must have screamed because my parents came running. They found me curled in the corner of my room, shaking. The mirror, perfectly normal. My mother got rid of it the next day, though she wouldn't tell me why. But as the movers were hauling it away, I caught one last glimpse of the glass, and for just a second I saw something that wasn't my reflection. It was still in there, waiting. Years passed and I grew up. I left for college, got a job, and moved into my own apartment. The nightmares of the mirror faded, but they never completely went away. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of my reflection in a window and feel a shiver crawl up my spine, as if some part of me still wasn't convinced it was me staring back. Then, one evening, my mother called me. "I need you to come home," she said. Her voice was tight, strained. "What's wrong?" I asked, feeling a cold dread settle in my stomach. "It's back," she whispered. "The mirror." I hadn't seen it in over a decade. As far as I knew, it had been thrown away or destroyed. But when I arrived at the house, it was there, sitting in the hallway, exactly where it had been before. "Where did it come from?" I demanded. My mother looked pale, her hands wringing nervously. "I don't know. I opened the front door this morning and it was just there." We stared at it together. It looked exactly the same. Dust had gathered on its frame, but the glass was clear, too clear, as if it had never left. Then my mother spoke, her voice trembling. "It's been whispering." I felt my stomach tighten. "What does it say?" She swallowed hard. "It keeps asking for you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept my bedroom door shut, but I swore I could hear something in the hallway, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against glass. Tap, tap, tap. I pulled the covers over my head, my body trembling. Then the whisper came. "You belong here." I bolted upright, heart racing. The room was silent, but the air felt heavy, oppressive. I decided then and there I would end this. I grabbed a hammer from the garage, stormed into the hallway, and raised it high above my head. The mirror didn't reflect me anymore. Instead, I saw an endless black void, swirling and shifting. Shapes moved within it, writhing, waiting. I hesitated just a second too long. A pale hand shot out from the glass, fingers like ice wrapping around my wrist. I screamed, dropping the hammer, and tried to pull away, but the grip tightened, pulling me closer. Then I saw its face. It was me, but its skin was waxy and lifeless, its eyes black voids, and its lips curved into a grotesque smile. It wanted me. It wanted to take my place. With one final pull, it yanked me forward. I fell into the mirror, tumbling into darkness. I woke up in a house identical to my own, but something was wrong. The air was too still, the light dim and cold. The windows showed only darkness beyond, no street, no sky, just an endless void. I ran to the mirror, my heart pounding. On the other side, I saw my bedroom, my real bedroom. And standing there wearing my face was it. It met my gaze and smiled. Then it turned and walked away, leaving me trapped in the silent, endless mirror world. I screamed, pounded on the glass, begged, but the only response was my own reflection, smiling. And then the lights went out. The darkness swallowed me. At first I thought I had simply shut my eyes, but when I tried to open them, I realized they already were. There was nothing to see, no light, no shapes, not even the faintest glow of my own hands in front of my face. I was nowhere. I took a shaky breath and it sounded wrong, like it didn't belong to me. The air was thick, heavy, pressing against my skin like unseen hands. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, but even that felt distant, muffled. Then, a voice. "Welcome home." It came from everywhere and nowhere, curling around me like smoke. I spun around, at least I thought I did, but the darkness was absolute, no reference points, no up or down, just endless void. "Let me out!" I shouted. My voice didn't echo, it just stopped as if the void devoured it. A laugh, low, knowing. "You don't understand, do you?" the voice whispered. "You're not trapped in here." A flicker of light, just for a second. My breath caught as I saw something shift in the void. A shape, a figure. It was me. No, not me. It moved the way I moved, but not quite. Its limbs were just a little too long, its smile stretching just a little too wide, and then it stepped closer. I scrambled back, my pulse hammering, but the darkness offered no escape. The thing wearing my face stopped inches from me. I could see it clearly now, its skin too pale, too smooth like a mannequin's, its eyes were pits of shifting black. "You were never supposed to leave," it murmured. I shook my head, trembling. "This isn't real. This isn't real." The thing tilted its head, studying me. Then it grinned. "You're right, but neither are you." The world cracked. A jagged, splintering sound filled my ears, and suddenly the void wasn't empty anymore. I was standing in my bedroom, or a warped nightmare version of it. The colors were dull, drained, like an old photograph left too long in the sun. The walls breathed, shifting like living flesh. The mirror was still there, but now it was just a frame filled with swirling black. And in the reflection, I saw it. My life. Through the glass, I saw my own body moving through the real world. My family, my home, my mother talking to me, laughing, eating, living, but it wasn't me. I pounded on the glass. Stop! The other me turned its head, slowly, almost deliberately. And it smiled, then it reached up and covered the mirror with a sheet. The last thing I saw was my own terrified face disappearing into darkness. And then I was alone, trapped. But I wasn't giving up, because somewhere deep in the void the whispers began again. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't be the last. The silence was the worst part. At first I screamed. I pounded my fists against the glass, kicked it, threw myself against it. But the mirror didn't even shudder. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a wall between realities, and I was on the wrong side of it. Then came the whispers. Not just one voice, but many. Soft, urgent, overlapping. They slithered through the air, curling around my ears like unseen fingers. You are not alone. He took our places too. You can still escape. My breath hitched. I turned in slow, careful movements. The warped version of my room stretched behind me, its colors bleeding at the edges like water on old paper. The walls weren't solid anymore. They pulsed, shifting like something half alive. And then I saw them, shadows, figures standing in the corners, barely visible, their faces half-formed. Some looked almost human, while others had empty black pits where their eyes should have been. They were trapped here, just like me. My chest tightened. Who are you? A figure stepped forward. A girl, maybe 16 or 17. Her hair hung in long, tangled strands, and her skin was pale as old paper. Her lips moved, but her voice whispered directly into my mind. He stole me. I shivered. The thing in the mirror? She nodded, her form flickering like a bad signal. It took my place. My parents never knew. No one ever knows. My stomach twisted. My parents had no idea. No one would come looking for me because, as far as they were concerned, I was already there, living my life, pretending to be me. The whispers grew urgent. You must take it back. Break the mirror. It is the only way. I clenched my fists. I tried. It didn't break. The girl's expression twisted into something haunted. Because you're not real anymore. I recoiled. What the hell is that supposed to mean? A low hum filled the air, deep and resonant. The other figures shrank back into the shadows. The girl flinched. It knows we're talking. Then the air turned cold. The walls darkened. The shifting, bleeding colors were swallowed by pure black, and an unnatural wind howled through the room. Something was coming. I turned back to the mirror. It was still covered by the sheet. A thick, unnatural silence followed, pressing against my skull, and then tap, tap, tap. A handprint formed on the other side of the glass, pressing through the fabric. My breath hitched. Then a voice, not the whispers, not the girl. It was my voice. Don't listen to them. I froze. The sheet began to lift, slowly, revealing the face of the thing that had stolen my life. It smiled, its black eyes locking onto mine. They're lying to you, it whispered. You don't belong out there anymore. The shadows behind me began to writhe, whispering warnings. I felt the weight of their words, the urgency, but something in me hesitated. The thing in the mirror saw it. It leaned closer, grinning. You're not real anymore, it whispered, but I am. Then it pressed its palm against the glass, and I felt it inside my skull. Memories flooded my mind, but they weren't mine. A childhood I never lived. A mother who was not my mother, a life spent in the mirror, watching, waiting. I had never been the real one. I gasped, stumbling backward. The girl grabbed my arm. "Fight it!" she begged. The whispers screamed, the glass rippled, and suddenly I saw everything. The countless lives this thing had stolen, the endless faces it had worn, the souls it had replaced, and I refused to be one of them. With a primal scream, I lunged at the mirror. My fists collided with the glass, but this time it cracked. Webs of fractures spread outward, distorting my reflection. The thing's smile faltered. "No!" I slammed my fist into the glass again, and again. The whispers rose in a deafening chorus, screaming. The other figures rushed forward, their hands joining mine, pounding, clawing, breaking. The mirror shattered, light exploded around me, too bright, too sharp. I felt myself falling, tumbling through space, through time, through something vast and unknowable. And then I woke up. I was lying in my bed, the real one. The hallway was silent. My room was normal. The mirror was gone. For a long moment I just breathed, my hands gripping the sheets. Then slowly I stood and walked to the door. The hallway was empty, the walls solid, the world real. I was home, but as I turned to glance at my bedroom window, my reflection was already waiting for me, smiling, and then it blinked. For days, I told myself it was over. The mirror was gone, the whispers had stopped, the air in the house felt lighter, real. My mother never mentioned it again, and I didn't dare bring it up. Maybe she didn't remember it the way I did. Maybe that was for the best. But something wasn't right. It was little things at first. I would catch my reflection moving just a fraction too late, as if it had to remember what it was supposed to do. Sometimes, when I blinked, I swore my eyes took an extra moment to close in the mirror, and then the dreams returned. In them, I was standing in a vast, endless hallway filled with mirrors. Some were cracked, others shattered, but all of them showed something wrong. Reflections that weren't quite human, faces that weren't quite mine. And at the end of the hallway, something watched me. I always woke up drenched in sweat, the feeling of unseen eyes lingering long after I was awake. Then came the other things. The footsteps in the hall at night, the faint tapping on my window when no one was there. And worst of all, my mother. She was different. Not drastically, not in a way that could be explained. But I started noticing things. The way she moved, a little too precise. The way she watched me when she thought I wasn't looking. And then one evening, she said something that made my blood run cold. I had been quiet all day, lost in thought, trying to convince myself I was imagining everything. I was setting the table for dinner when she spoke. "You seem distant," I forced a smile. "Just tired." She nodded, her expression unreadable. Then, after a pause, she said, "You know, sometimes I still hear it." I froze, my grip on the plate tightened. "Hear what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother smiled, too wide. "The whispering," she said. "At night." The plate slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor. She didn't react. She just kept smiling, watching. Something was wrong. Something had followed me back, and I wasn't sure if it was still in the mirror or if it was sitting across from me, wearing my mother's face. I didn't move. My mother, or the thing pretending to be her, watched me from across the table, her smile too wide, her eyes too still. The air in the house had shifted, thick with something unseen, something waiting. I couldn't stay here. Heart pounding, I forced myself to nod as if nothing was wrong. I think I need some fresh air," I said, my voice barely steady. My mother's head tilted, the smile never fading. "Of course," she murmured. "Go ahead, but don't be too long." The way she said it sent ice through my veins. I walked to the front door, forcing myself to move naturally. My hand gripped the knob. I twisted, locked. I glanced back. She was still sitting at the table, but her smile had grown wider. "It's late," she said. "Stay." A shadow flickered in the corner of the room. A shape, tall, wrong, watching. Panic surged through me. I turned to the nearest mirror, the small one in the entryway. I hadn't dared look at it in days. But now, I had no choice. And what I saw made my blood run cold. My reflection wasn't copying me. It was moving on its own. It lifted a hand, reaching toward me. But not to pull me in, to help. I didn't think. I lunged forward, pressing both hands against the glass. My reflection grabbed me back and pulled. The world inverted. For a moment, I was nowhere, just cold, crushing darkness, whispers skittering along my skin. Then, I was standing in my real house. The air was warm, alive. The floorboards creaked like they always had, and sitting at the table was my real mother. She looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned back toward the mirror. Through the glass, I saw the other world, the warped, hollow version of my home. And in it, standing where I had just been, was her, the thing that had worn my mother's face. And beside her, emerging from the shadows, was the real monster. It had no face, just black pits where eyes should be, a mouth stretched too wide. It placed one long-fingered hand on my copy's shoulder and leaned in. I knew it was whispering. My copy turned, looking at me through the glass, and then, with a slow, knowing smile, she reached up and closed the mirror, like a door. Gone. For the first time in weeks, the air felt normal. The house was still, but not in that waiting, unnatural way. Just peaceful. Real. The nightmare was over, but deep down, I knew one thing. That wasn't the only mirror, and someday, it would open again.